This is Ken Woods interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends on March the 8th, 1979 in Medford, Oklahoma, and I'm visiting with Mr. Andrew J. Swanson, and he's called Andy Swanson. And Mr. Swanson is a longtime farmer in this area. He has grown up and lived in Medford all of his life, and we'll be talking about his life and about the things he has seen in the Medford area. To begin with, I'd like for you to tell me a little bit about your family, your father, your mother's maiden name, and how they came to this area.
My father and mother were originally from Sweden. Neither one of them knew each other. They come over as children, but they got acquainted in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and were married in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and lived there until the opening of the Cherokee Strip. Father came down and got a claim, and then mother and three older sisters followed later.
How did they decide to come here?
Well, they thought it was an opportunity to get a home of their own, and it was the opening of the strip, and it was a chance for a young couple to establish a home.
They were looking for farmland.
They were looking for farmland.
Did your father tell you any stories about the run that you recall?
Yes, he told about the run, the stories, and he came on the train down to Caldwell, Kansas, or south of there on the state line. And that was a special train that come through with so many people on it from all north of there to the state borderline and up to Minneapolis, Minnesota there on the Canada line. They all got off there and they started south, and he got as far as in the Numa, Lamont area and thought that he had a claim, but the next morning he found out there were more people on that land than he, so he just had a kind of a marker instead of a stake for the deed to the land, and so he started back to go home. Then he was a long time, and always worked as a lumberjack or lumber yards or something in lumber business in Wisconsin and Minneapolis and in Minnesota, in that part of the country, and he was experienced with lumber, and he then become interested in talking with a fellow that was expecting a carload of lumber in the next day on the train. When he got there with the lumber, well, before that he said, well, he was looking for somebody that had experience, and he offered him a kind of what today we'd call kind of an inflated peacetime labor wages if he'd stay for 2 or 3 months, and he stayed. And so I guess he sold probably the first bill of lumber that was sold in Medford while the manager was getting the release from the railroad and stepped that away to the carload of lumber. And since he had leave of absence from his job that he was working with in Minnesota, why he couldn't turn down that wage that he was offered, and so he stayed here, and he said every day he stayed he liked it better. So then he found a place out west of Clyde, the present that he homesteaded on then, of a druggist out of Brush City that had staked that place, and he moved a house down on it and was going to live there, but he decided it was too far to ride his pony from Bluff City out to the farm. So he wanted to sell it My father paid him about what the house building was worth and got that relinquishment, and so he filed on it and improved it. And that is his homestead.
And you were born there?
I was born there then.
What year were you born?
I was born in 1907.
1907, years later.
Years later, that's right. I got a certificate as a Jubilee boy living on a place I was born from the governor of the state of Oklahoma when the 50th year of the Jubilee year of the statehood.
That would have been Governor Gary then?
No,
Jubilee year of statehood would have been Governor
it was. Okay.
1957.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you recall growing up on that homestead? Some of your experiences?
You mean nicknames?
No.
Oh.
Some of the things that happened as you were growing up on that.
Oh, well, I don't know. It's just like a normal things there. You seen just like all other pioneer homes. We've seen hard times, we've seen good times, and wound up as a place I'm proud of, and it's just been home to me.
Why don't you talk about methods of farming in your period of growing up? Because you began to, about the time of World War I, you were 7 or 8 years old. So let's think about what life was like on the farm, some of the methods of farming that you had during that period.
During that period was one of the biggest changes, I think, that probably anybody will ever see in farming here. Up until that time, we never knew that a tractor, hardly. They had some larger gas thrash machine engines, but as far as agriculture farming, there wasn't. It was all done with horses. But as labor shortage, and at that time, for the World War I boys in the service, things were changing then to not so much with hand power and all. It went to tractors and things. Where there were a lot of automobiles in 1917 when I was 10 years old. But I know my father got a tractor in 1917 when I was 10 years old. And it was just a big change at that time.
Tell about that first tractor, what it was like, the very early tractor.
Well, it was one of the first chain-driven tractors that International put out. It was sold by the Stewart Hardware Company, where my father bought it here in Medford. And it was the first chain-driven traction drive. Before that, it was more or less just disc clutch type, which was really one of the big changes in tractors at that time.
Where did you go to school?
I went to school in country school called Cherryvale, District 41 in Grant County, just a mile and a half from my home. And I went there for 8 years. Started in the fall of 1913 and started high school then in Waurika 8 years later in 21. And went there for 4 years. Graduated in class of 1925. And I went to Wichita Business College for a while. And I never did ever go there. Just wanted to kind of broaden my education and thought it would be a great help to me on the farm.
Is Cherryvale a community? Was it the name of the community?
It was one of the community centers, such as the Cherryville Grange and things like that was started there. And we used to have Sunday school and church there in the Cherryville Schoolhouse, and it's really one of the most active school districts of any school in the Clyde area, which it was considered at that time.
You know, it's interesting that there are a lot of cherry in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
In eastern Oklahoma, I haven't heard of the one here, but there are, I don't know how many cherry beds. One of the well-known names,
Well, I don't know whether that's right, but I've heard it that people by the name of Dunn's, the first schoolhouse was on their place, and they come to Cherryville, Kansas. And I heard that's where it got its name, Cherryville. I don't know whether that's right or not, but that's what I've
It makes sense because a lot of the eastern Oklahoma towns, Indian towns, are named after Indian towns in Alabama and other places, and a lot of the towns on the railroads are named after the hometowns of various officials of the railroad back east. Their hometowns.
Let's see. Uh-huh.
Ardmore and many others,
Mm-hmm.
after other towns.
Yes.
So I guess it's the sentiment of the old hometown carries through there. What are some of the real activities you remember as you were in the younger grades, in the elementary grades in Cherryville?
Oh, we used to have, in the fall, we'd always have for buck suppers and pie suppers to raise money to have a Christmas tree and big gathering at Christmas time. And Cherryville was always for programs and entertainments and literary. And that way they would have those literary, might say their program were made up of home talent, just literary programs. And then we would have the proceeds would go for to buy treats and stuff for Christmas time. We used to have some awful big crowds there for their buck supper and pie suppers and things that they had at that time that you don't hear of them anymore. And different things like that went on. And then the Grange, that they always had entertainments and stuff there, and Sunday school parties and things there.
The school was pretty much a community center, wasn't
it? It was in our area. It was the leading community center.
Did it also serve as a church on Sunday?
We would have church and Sunday school there on Sunday. All the time. We maybe never had a preacher, but it was always Sunday school, and we used Union literature and stuff there for Sunday school.
Was it a kind of an interdenominational church?
That is what I meant when I said Union. The old Cook Sunday school literature that probably was one of the most popular non-denominational church Sunday school literature.
You said you didn't have a preacher. Who did you have deliver your message?
Oh, we would get preachers out of Waurika and sometimes out of Medford and that come out, and it'd be like today they call two-charge preachers that preach at two different places. And but sometimes it, depending on who we could get, the denomination.
Do you recall any highlights of things that happened when you were in grade school, things that stand out in your memory?
Oh, I don't know of any one thing, but I know as a child, well, it seemed like that literary programs and things that they had, and then the big Christmas trees, and they'd have a big Christmas exchange there. Well, kids, why, that was always a see what Santa had bought was on the tree. I can remember a .22 rifle gun that I got off at a Christmas exchange when Santa Claus come down and the exchange. It was a thing I'd always remember that gun.
That is a community Christmas tree?
Yes, that we'd have there, like I was saying. And they'd always have treats in there from the money that was raised through the pie suppers and box suppers and things that way.
Did Santa himself come?
Well, oh yes, we had a Santa. I was a firm believer in Santa Claus. That was a highlight. In the early days when I went to grade school there. And so after he'd been there, and we'd get those treats and things off that he'd brought in, why, we really were firm believers after that.
Do you recall any early tragedies like fires or cyclones or tornadoes or anything during your early period?
No, I don't remember of any. I know one time, though, after I got out of school, lightning struck the schoolhouse, and nobody was hurt, but it sure shook them up. I was on the school board then, and so that summer we built a storm cellar.
Was Medford the nearest town to
No, near Waurika. We had a small country town there, which today is just an elevator, and one of the stronger. In fact, it's the homestead for the Clyde Co-op, which is now 7 different communities and towns that incorporated in their co-op. But and there's where we go for groceries and things like that locally. But as far as a town of any selection and stuff like that, why, we were closer to Waurika.
How often did you get there when you were young?
Oh, when we was young, why, we'd get there on Saturday.
Is there any activity that stood out in Waurika? What was the nightlife like, or the daytime life like, the entertainment and such in Waurika?
Oh, they had picture shows there on Saturday afternoons and things for when he'd come in. They were no sound to them, but they had picture to them.
Do you remember any of these silent movies that stood out in your memory?
No, I don't. I just remember they were just pictures. In fact, I never really was too much of a picture show man, but and then they had some nice pictures, and they were all silent, and always had somebody played the piano, so it was nice mellow background music with it.
What about the dances? Square dancing, round dancing, or whatever?
Well, there was a lot of that in the community, but as far as Cherry Vale, there wasn't so much of that. There was in the district west of us, in Sunnyside. That was known there as Rickaball dances, and they had a barn that was on Saturday night. Things-wise, they'd have dances there. In the Red Hill district, they never had regular there, but there was Riley's, different ones they'd fold up their beds and get room there and have a square dance in the rooms, and things like that but it was just in the Cherry Vale school district, that 3-mile square area, there wasn't dances there, but there was in the area that I was.
What about the time of World War I? Do you remember, what do you recall about that war period, World War I? You were about 7 or 8 years old.
No, I was older than that.
When we got into
Yeah, World War I was in 17, 18, and in there. Of course, I was 10 and 11 years old. And that was a change then. You know, like dancing, well, square dance kind of went out in that time. Went to Charleston and Black Bottom. and then right after the war, it was quite a change, just like everything else. And we've seen a big change in World War I.
Do you recall, what do you recall in your entire schooling period as the most exciting thing that happened in your life?
Well,
Does anything stand out?
I don't really know of anything that stood out.
Do you recall in Waurika any occasion where they had maybe a major parade or maybe had some entertainment that kind of threw out something like the 101 Ranch?
No, we never had anything like that. But when I got in high school, was going to Waurika then, was what they then began to more celebrate the opening of the Cherokee Strip. And that began, and I happened to be a member of we called it those days, that was before the FFA, and our agriculture program then was, they had 2 federal programs for aid for schools to have vocational agriculture. And at that time, there was Smith Hughes, were the 2 men, the author of the Farm Federal School Bill. I can't recall what the name of the other one was, but in Grant County here, the schools that had vocational agriculture that were operating under the federal program, the bill sponsored by the author of the bill was Smith and Hughes. And that's what we operated on then until in 1928, a few years after I got out of high school. They consolidated them, and the FFA, what is present today, was organized in the United States there. And that's what we're operating under. But getting back to starting out with Waurika, the Smith Hughes group, and our instructor then was Bill Green from Waurika. He was a native of Waurika, born before the opening of the strip in Kansas, but came here small child with his parents, and got his education in Waurika and Stillwater, where he got his agriculture teaching degree. And he started and was going to have a little fair and just an exhibit of our showing of our projects that we had. And then the merchants took it up and they wanted to have some entertainment and that, and they started then calling it the Old Settlers Reunion, which is going strong yet today. And that was organized, and so I'm proud that I kind of was one of them, that was one of the first exhibitors of that original year when it was started. It was back in 1921 and 22. When I don't think they weren't the Lions Club at that time, but it was just the business people of Waurika that then took it up and started it. And they still have it yet today. But the showing of the livestock, they don't have. They've gone to the county fair and the spring livestock fair, and it's a full time, it's a full day of a celebration of the Cherokee Strip. I don't know about one of the main things that I can remember that started when I was in high school.
Backtracking a little bit into your school, what about the sports in high school, when you were in high school? What were the popular?
Well, it started, and they had football when I started high school, but there were so many larger and older boys that just come for to play football, and they began to down if you had to make certain grades and had been in school, full credits and everything, and so it just kind of fizzled out. And we didn't have any more football in until after I got out of high school. And basketball was popular, but we didn't have we had the county, and that was about all the tournaments there was. I was quite a ways out in the country, one about the furthest away, and sometimes we didn't have school buses and things. We'd go Model T to high school, my twin sister and I, and then when it was bad, well, I rode a pony and she stayed in town. And sometimes we couldn't get in for practice and stuff like that on the pony, and so I really wasn't, well, I just wasn't a star player.
I didn't ask you which high school you went to. Did you go to Waurika High?
Waurika.
I assumed that, but I didn't ask.
Yeah.
What about other high school activities? We talked about the Cherryville activities. What other high school activities did you have?
Well, we had in vocational agriculture. We always attended all the judging contests and everything like that, and I was always pretty active in all of that. And I don't know, I was I think a little more made first team on that than I did basketball athletics. I was a little better in that, and so we'd go to the state fairs, and county fairs, district fairs, judging all contests.
How did you describe a county fair of that time? We're talking about about the time right after World War I, really. What were the county fairs like?
Well, at that time we didn't have a county fairgrounds. There were about four towns in the county that kind of sponsored it, and they would rotate around between Lamont and Pond Creek, Medford and Waurika, and they were responsible for getting up the pens and stuff, and it was out in the open more. And later then they voted their bonds, not bonds, but to have a millage for the county fair, and and they voted for to have so many mills for to build some fairground equipment and that. And so today they have a Pond Creek.
What would you bring in for your from the outside entertainment? Did you have to come in for a county fair other than your own competition?
Well, they would, of course, sometimes have a little carnival come in for a day or two, and there while the fair was going on. I guess that would be the main competition. But they'd always have all those towns had a community house that they called a community center, and there would be the ladies' exhibits and stuff like that, but the livestock would be in pens and that out in the open.
On the carnivals of that time, what are the things you remember about the carnivals of that period?
Oh, just exactly about like they are today. Grass wheel and a merry-go-round, and then some side places where you could spend your money on. You could win once in a while enough to kind of encourage you, to keep on playing them.
Couldn't come out of bed.
But you'd wind up with losing.
You went to Wichita to the business school. Then you came back here after that, and you went back to the farm. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, when you came back, were you operating the farm with your father?
Yes.
Why don't you talk a little about the what you were planting at that time? We haven't talked about that at all. What crops or what you were planting or what you were raising if you were raising stock.
Well, we were in stock, and we were general farmers with stock. And my club project then was sheep. I started with sheep as a club project for 10 years, and so I've been very active in sheep, and then I'm still today. I've still got some sheep, and that's been my project, and I've been active in the county and state and district fairs, if anything, and wool and sheep and that more than I have in other things. But as a general, what my father and I were in, and what we raised, why, of course, like I said, in the early days with horses, and of course we raised a lot of oats. Spring crop was oats, and then we'd have some alfalfa. We raised in maize and small grains like that for feed and stuff for chickens, poultry, and hogs and things that way. We had hogs up until I kind of, with my sheep, kind of took over, crowded Papa's hogs out. But up till that time, my father was one of the larger stock hog producers in the country. But we kind of, hogs went to pot after World War I and things, and they weren't regular like with sheep, and so it just seemed like, I don't know, like I said, I've just been pushing sheep more than any one crop. Livestock. Hogs? Well, we'd feed hogs in those days, and we'd buy, like I said, we raised so many that we had to buy much of the grain, and of course there's probably, we've seen more change in hogs than any livestock today. In those days they raised big type hogs that were of a lard type. So today they're the big, tall, lean, bacon type hogs as we're called. But in those days we didn't have any Crisco and stuff like that, and the lard was important, and we'd have our more on the farm, and we'd make soap and stuff out of lard, and that was quite an item in those days. So we've seen an awful change in the hogs. But so we fed them, and corn was for big and more fattening instead of growing than it is today.
Tell me how you made soap.
Yeah, that is, you'd take the cracklings out of the meat that you had rendered down for lard, take that and lye and water. That was about the main thing, and just kind of boil it down and then it's out to dry.
How good is that brown look?
Well, that depends on whether you scorch those cracklings before you quit trying to render all the grease out of them you could, lard, and it would then make your soap brown.
All the homemade soap I ever saw was brown.
Oh, homemade soap. There was some awful white soap that's made out of milk, and it was just as white as milk.
Is that right?
And then, like I said, if it was just lard that had never been scorched, I guess is what you'd call it, by getting too hot from rendering your lard. And so that's, I guess, what made the soap dark. I don't know exactly why, but that was always my opinion of it.
Yeah.
And,
you raised cattle. You haven't mentioned cattle. You mentioned
yes, we raised cattle. We raised stock cattle and milk cows, and we milked a lot of cows. In the wintertime, we'd milk. We more at that time raised what they called the general type cattle. And was more of a Poll Durham and red pole cattle, what was a general type cattle. It was good beef conformation and still produced a good milk and type animal. And in the summertime, we'd be busy working in the field and harvesting, and so we'd just let those cows that had spring calves would take and raise their calf, and they were, like I said, more little bit on the milk order, so we'd put 2 calves on a cow. And,
what about
and would let her raise 2 calves that way instead of putting them on a bucket, and would milk from them.
How about wheat? You're from wheat country.
Well, we raise wheat, and we bind it and shock it and then thrash it. And that was quite a process, going through that shocking and first binding and then shocking and then thrashing. And we didn't have the yields we have today. The country was new, the land was new, but it seemed like we always raised good milling wheat. But we've got better breeds of varieties of wheat that's been bred up, and so our yields have doubled and tripled with better equipment, better farming. They say with anything that better equipment makes a good farmer better.
Wasn't there a man from Kingfisher, one of the developers of one of the best things that he...
That's right. All is from out in west of there that raised the tribe wheat. There's different varieties of his and different, but I think the variety that I can't call his name now, but Danny was his name. That was a bachelor, and Danny's wheat, and today his was a bred up wheat that he had there, and I think that it's probably one of the most popular wheats yet today, with all the increased varieties that they have. It's the most consistent wheat in this area, and I think everybody plants some of it, but it's just a consistent variety, but of course they're all trying to find something a little better.
Where did you all ship your wheat?
And we sold it at Clyde. Clyde was our wheat market.
That was a co-op, right?
And that is what is today the co-op.
Where did Clyde come from? How did their organization start?
The Clyde co-op, they bought out the Blackwell Milling Company. A fellow by the name of Clarence Roseberry was the first manager. He was working for the Blackwell Milling Company, and of course they acquired him when they got the elevator. He wanted the job. He was a native and lived on his parents' homesteaded a place east of Clyde, between Clyde and Medford. And his wife was Laura Hill was her maiden name. And the Hills lived northeast of Clyde. So they were local folks. He was a dandy grain buyer, but he then left and went to Tonkawa and got Tonkawa Milling Company there and got into business for himself. And he retired there.
What are some of the activities you recall that you have been involved in? And you mentioned that you helped to found this church at this pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
And what else have you been involved in the community? You mentioned the school board. Which school board were you on?
On Cherryvale.
Cherryvale.
Rural school. I was on school board then after I got out of school and was just in the community there.
What are some of the problems that you faced as a community school board member?
Oh, just, I don't know. We were always, don't know we ever had anything. Cherryvale was kind of we were better evaluated district than most of the districts. We were right west of Clyde, and as the railroad went from Clyde to Waurika, it went completely across the whole district. And if you were fortunate to have a railroad or something like that to help the tax situation, so in Cherryvale, our valuation in our district was one of the high ones. And we also had an average for the type of the land, the assessed valuation of our land was an average district. And it seemed like I think we were diversified and there's much livestock and stuff there. So our tax problem in Cherryvale was, we hired always one of to get the better school teachers, pay them a little more, We really didn't have problems.
What are other things you were involved with in a community like that?
Well, my father was on the Clyde Co-op board for quite a while. And in his retirement, I was on it for a while. And then I've been in things like involved in the grains. Always took an active part in it. Oh, kind of one that, like I said earlier, I've been trying to promote sheep. And I was instrumental in getting a county organized in a county lamb and marketing program, wool and sheep marketing program. And we had grade our lambs and things like that. And they would go direct from the farm as graded. And we knew what they were going to be, what the grade would be when they arrived at the market, whether it was Oklahoma City or Wichita or what. But we didn't know what the market would be the day we delivered them. So we were to have, though, a premium for graded lambs, run around 75 cents, 100, above whatever the market was that day that they were on the market. And it has been an active organization here in the county. I was on the state board and district, and on the wool. I've been on the wool growers board for 27 years at headquarters in Kansas City for 5-state area. So,
Did you all shear your own sheep?
well, we would always try to promote shearing. That's something that many don't do because it's a back-breaking job. By the time you get broke into shearing, why you're through until you don't do it. But I don't know. Like I said, I always enjoyed anything that was around sheep. And so I done my own. But there was on a trade to swap out with Australia, a great sheep state, nation, country, with Sunbeam equipment, electric equipment and stuff that is one of the larger companies in the country. We got 8 of them in the United States to experiment with. I had one in the Midwest, got 8 for to distribute around, and one was Stillwater. I had it there, but they never could get anybody down there interested in using it. I'd get it up here, and I'd done more promotion with it, sheared my own sheep, and had more people using it until it had been there long enough. It had been depreciated down and valued on the invoice and stuff. So they then just give it to me. And I have it out home. There's several still bar it. But it's on a table, a swivel table. And you shackle 3 legs. When you get the sheep in there, that's a release to your back. There's 90% of the controlling of sheep is done between your knees. And you sleeping over then, that's where it gets you in the back. And so in shearing the sheep, well, I shear there, tied, and sack my own wool. And I still am.
Did you raise for mutton as well as wool?
I think that the best cross in sheep for this, the best cross for sheep in this country is a Western type, is what is called as a wool type. You hear mention, well, is it Western or native? Well, a native is a mutton type sheep. I think that you get your hybrid bigger with a cross, and you got a better production, I think, by crossing them. And I like the cross of a Western ewe and a mutton ram, and a mutton breed. I'm strong for a Suffolk ram. I think that makes the best cross.
Where did you sell for mutton? Where did you ship to?
Well, we would ship to sell to Wichita and Oklahoma City, and most of the sheep is consumed in the east, and New Jersey and those states, but a lot of them were shipped to Omaha. Omaha and Denver is the leading markets around here, and today all of those markets, the labor unions have closed down the marketing, so there is one slaughtering place in New Mexico, and there's some done in Denver, and that's the closest around here today. And that's what has hurt our sheep market more than anything.
Any other areas that you have been active and involved in over the years?
Any
Other
other
areas
thing?
of activity?
Well, I was one of the promoters for Farm Bureau when it come to the Oklahoma. I was on, as I said, the Midwest wool growers up at, and would go to Kansas City a few times during the year. And Farm Bureau is made up a lot of an insurance business. That is one of their big projects that they have. But in order to get started, you've got to have a parental insurance company to be, saying is, a big uncle or brother to you to get started. Well, Kansas was going to help Oklahoma get started. And a fellow by the name of Dr. Wolf was a veterinarian from Ottawa, Kansas, was a state Farm Bureau master. He was the president of the Kansas Farm Bureau. And he was also secretary of the Midwest Wool Growers. We had, up at that time, like I said, would have go to Kansas City and meet there together. And of course, he was always wanting to know about here in Oklahoma, how the farmers and what attitude they had towards Farm Bureau. And so there are two directors representing from Oklahoma, and Mr. Earl B. Cole at that time from Aldous, Oklahoma. So we'd always have a little council with him up there about the Farm Bureau and whether they wanted to back us or not. And at that time, the Midwest had a manager by the name of Dan Arnold. Dan Arnold was a former county agent in the state of Oklahoma. He was born and raised in eastern Oklahoma and had been at Perry in Noble County, the county agent. And he was our manager at that time, and he was an outstanding man, but he thought that he could have an outstanding federal wool grader, and that they would be responsible for the wool. Well, they kind of took advantage of Dan not being a wool man, and so Dan had him to, he said he was just going to have to get some other work, and Mr. Cox knew what a outstanding Dan was, a fellow, and so if you're going to change your place, how about going down to Oklahoma? Start Farm Bureau. So he was the first executive secretary in the state of Oklahoma. And I was trying to lift together and recommend him and get him started.
When was that? What year?
Well, that was back in the early 40s, along 41 or 2, and later, when they first began talking, later 38, you know.
And how long was he executive secretary?
He was there till, I don't remember just what year he did quit, but he was there until, the boy that's there now.
Ken McCall.
Ken McCall, that's right.
Ken came from office.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's right. Ken was there, and he followed Dan. And, so then, was in the county, and up to about 2 years ago, I was on the board on and off, and I was off for a while, and I had 2 daughters, and they were in high school, and Rainbow, and things like that, and I just had too many places to go and couldn't be there. So I just dropped out for a while.
Any other activities that you think of that we haven't talked about?
I just belong to those things. And yeah, you see, I'm wearing 2 pins, a lay leader in the Methodist Church, and 50-year pin is a Sonic Mason. I started in the masonry as a beam lay boy. And that. Then when we started the soil conservation here in Grant County, I've been on it since it was started. In fact, I was the first temporary chairman in Grant County.
What are some of your projects for the soil conservation group?
Well, I feel like that you mean for educational programs.
Yes, whatever you have.
Yeah, well, we of course set up, to the main objective of soil conservation is to make every acre to use it to its best accountability and production, whether it's suitable for grass or for grain, or what. The objective is that, and we've tried that, and I think we have done. I know that there is some land that should have never been broke out and should have been left to grass, that I think would have been more productive, but with the fertilizer coming in the method of farming, why, it's hard to make some fellows believe that. But that's been our goal. But then we've been in the educational field to try to promote it. We've worked with soil conservation is a family program. It starts with the home. And we have the Grant County Soil Conservation Fair. It was started here 25 years ago. First one in the nation, and today it's over, I think half of the states in the Union have had some kind of soil conservation fairs. And at the fairs, what we have there is the award for the year's activity of the school children and awards for pastry making, all kind of pastries, different pies and fancy rolls and bread. And that's one thing that they may tell you is a lost art today, that there isn't any homemade bread. If you come to our fair, and I'm a believer out of it, it's not a lost art in Grant County. I think that's right, isn't it, Ms. Pond? And so and so we have soil judging, land judging, and grass identification, posters, and for the little first three graders, we have flat painting and finger painting, posters, and such things as that the awards are for. Also speech contests, most anything with soil conservation. We have the Bankers Awards for the Outstanding Farmer of the Year. And so there's awards for the whole family, the housewife and the farmer and the children.
We have about a minute left on this tape. Ms. Pond, you got anything else we ought to ask Mr. Swanson?
Yeah.
Talk about I said we got about a minute.
Yeah.
I know you can't tell us a minute. Let's talk about your marriage and children.
My wife was a former Milo Johnson from Waurika. Her folks lived on a farm. She attended a rural school, Mount Zion, and then in Waurika High School. So she got her high school education and 2 years in Chickasha, and then a year or so in Alva, Northwestern. We were school teachers for 6 years before we were married. And after our marriage, she was strictly a home wife and companion. We had 2 children, 2 girls, Carolyn and Dolores. And Carolyn was married, the oldest girl, and her husband, Kenneth Sims. They were Waurika High School graduates, both of them. And then from Stillwater, Oklahoma, she received a BS degree in vocational home ec, and he received a DDV, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, DVM, I meant, and is now running a small animal hospital in Louisville, Kentucky. And the other daughter is, her husband is vocational home extension agent of Harper County, and she's a housewife and doing some substitute teaching, stuff like that, and I have 5 grandchildren.
Thank you. This has been an interview with Mr. Andy Swanson in Medford on March the 8th of 1979. We certainly appreciate it.